You're listening to The Pulse on AMI Audio. I'm Grant Hardy. A new report shares findings from a study that analyzed the accessibility of 50 popular apps across 5 key industries: food and delivery, payments, streaming media, fitness, and shopping. The State of Mobile Accessibility SOMAA report was conducted by ArcTouch and Fable with advising from Joe Devon. Here to break down some of the key findings is Joe Devon. Joe is the co-founder of Global Accessibility Awareness Day and is the advisor on that SOMAA report. Also joining in is Ben Ogilvie, head of accessibility at ArcTouch. Hello, guys. Welcome to The Pulse.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, so we're going to start, Ben, with you. If you could just touch on what ArcTouch and the Fable community, what they are.
Yeah, ArcTouch is a native app development agency, a custom design and development agency. We started in 2009 at the beginning of the App Store and have worked with many clients across lots of different industries, everything from innovative startups to Fortune 500s and everything in between to build custom apps for iOS and Android. And we also do web and other platforms as well, but native apps are kind of the majority of our focus. And Fable is a partner of ours that we bring in to help us have the voices of users with disabilities involved throughout the design and development process when we're building projects and products for our clients.
Yeah. And this is really cool because ArcTouch puts an emphasis on accessibility, I believe, which is amazing because sometimes, you'll go off, find somebody to help you write an app, you come back and it's not accessible and you're not the coder. So it's like, what do I do? But with ArcTouch, you really have that emphasis on accessible experiences, which is really awesome. Yeah. I thought it was clear from your website, which really stood out to me, which is excellent.
Yeah, it's something we really pride ourselves on. Our mission since the beginning has been to build lovable apps, and we see lovability as the foundational pillars of that are something that's useful, delightful, and accessible.
Joe, could you talk a little bit about your role on the SOMAA report as an advisor?
Sure. I would say the Ben and the ArcTouch team are really good. It's not like they needed a ton of advice, really. I would say that I came in as a bit of motivation and inspiration because what had happened is a few years ago, my company had run the State of Accessibility report, the SOAR report, State of, exactly. State of Accessibility report. I haven't said it in a few years, so I'm a little rusty on it. But yeah, we called it SOAR. And the first couple of years, we were trying to focus a little bit on what had not been done already by the Web A Million report, looking at the top 100 sites using manual testing. But what we really realized was that mobile app testing was more important. And so we just started to introduce that in the third year, which was our last year of the report. Unfortunately, we were impacted by COVID like so many more. So there were no more reports to come after that. And then Ben and I became friends and we have a regular call together. And we just started kicking around the idea of bringing this back. And ArcTouch and Ben just came out and said, hey, let's do this report. And so I just shared with them, our experience.
Yeah, and it's a cool partnership, especially because mobile apps are just so ubiquitous right now. You've got, over 1 billion people with disabilities, some kind of disability using digital services. Ben, just to get this out of the way here, the 50 apps you tested across 5 industries ultimately prove there's significant work to be done, with FAIR coming back a lot in the report. How did you kind of arrive at that conclusion, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I won't go into the details of the full testing methodology and how we did that, but effectively we looked at 4 different types of assistive technology and established a set of testing criteria, 14 different specific criteria that we looked at across user flows that we selected that were key to each industry. So each industry had a different kind of core user flow, the reason that someone would use an app that's in that industry. And so we didn't look kind of screen by screen, but at the entirety of the user journey and how well assistive technologies were supported throughout those user journeys. And what we found, of the 50 apps we tested, 2 of them scored great, which was 85 or above on our testing scale. 9 of them scored failing, which was 30 or below. And the vast majority were squarely in the middle, kind of in that fair, poor to fair range. So when we looked at those effectively 200 different user journeys, 50 apps for assistive technologies, we found that 72% of them produced a poor or failing experience in at least one step of that core user journey, which can lead to churn, failure to convert. It's just not a good experience across the board.
Ben, did you find in a lot of cases that parts of an app were very well done, like very accessible, but then you would get to a part where it completely kind of messed up the user experience so that it seemed great, but you couldn't actually continue?
Yeah, we absolutely did. And it obviously varied from app to app, but it was evident that teams that are paying some attention to accessibility, some of those teams were still doing it in kind of a break fix fashion where they might spend a sprint focusing on issues on one screen and fixing things there. But meanwhile, the experience on the next screen or the previous screen would be out of sync. And so in each of the industries, we break down kind of a scorecard of each of the steps of the user flow and how well each of those steps did. And you can see a wide variability from step to step of things that do well and then drop off and then pick back up again. And it's really inconsistent. So we definitely saw that.
So talking about that sort of fix things that are broken approach, Joe, we've always argued in the past that accessibility is kind of the right thing to do, from a social equity perspective. But now it's emerging that it's actually a really important business case as well. When do you think that shift in perspective kind of happened?
I mean, I do get the sense that Global Accessibility Awareness Day brought a lot of attention and awareness, but the business case, I think we're still struggling to have that conversation. People ask me about it all the time because here we are. I wrote a blog post that to a very small crowd of maybe 10 database people, and it turned into something that reached over 200 million people on social media within a few years. And you don't get that kind of virality if it isn't a large audience. But I don't think we tell the story well enough, because the reality is that populations are aging across most of the world, with the exception of maybe Africa and a couple of other countries. And when you think about the oldest millennials are about 43, 44 right now. As soon as you hit 40, your vision starts to get worse. You start to need things like larger fonts. You need better color contrast. For me, in my mid 50s, my eyesight just keeps getting worse and worse every year. And we're going to see, so we've got like the median population is almost 40 in America. It's a little bit older in some of these other enormous countries. So we've got a demographic explosion happening, and my generation has brought decades of digital content with us. We're not going to be okay with providing a subpar experience. We're going to need access to all the content that we've built up around us for all of those decades. And if you don't serve us, you're going to really lose out. So it's a no question whatsoever. People will either realize it by going out of business, or they're going to wake up to the requirement that they're going to have to be accessible.
Yeah, I definitely think this ties into a lot of the work you're doing surrounding awareness, and we'll definitely be getting into this year's Global Accessibility Awareness Day a little later. Ben, any thoughts on accessibility sort of culture? We've had, we've had companies be sued for like delivery apps not being accessible when it's very clear, like, I have no doubt they would want people to be able to order pizza. How do we kind of, how does the work you're doing help to influence accessibility culture before it goes the wrong way in an organization?
Yeah, I think culture is so crucial to effective and sustainable delivery when it comes to accessibility. I'm really fortunate to be at an organization where when I raised my hand and said, I've got family members, a father and a son with disabilities, and I need to be doing this work, I had immediate executive buy-in from the top, from the co-founders of the company down, to say, go do it, and we're behind you, which I recognize is really rare, especially in a creative agency environment. But that's allowed us to build up the team and program that we have. And I see it in other companies too. I think that things like this report, our hope is that it gives companies and teams who are trying to kind of grassroots their way to more accessible delivery, if they don't have the executive buy-in, that things like this report help set a benchmark and help give teams more content that they can take to their leadership and say, look, this is not a niche audience. This is not a small group that we're trying to serve out of charity, but this is smart business, and also it's the law. And my hope is that things like this, complementing the WebAIM report in partnership with legislation that's coming into force in the EU and elsewhere, will help to drive that culture, because I see so much how that culture makes a critical difference on whether accessibility is maybe something that gets checked the box on once a year, and then the rest of the year it falls by the wayside until it gets audited again, or if it's really part of the lifeblood of the development process. And when we see those light bulbs come on with designers and developers, seeing the impact of creating content that either is delightful and lovable, or on the other side, frustrating and unusable by real people, and they see it as part of their mandate to make things that are great for as many people as possible, it really drives a huge difference in the way that accessibility gets executed.
Yeah, 100%. Really the work both of you guys are doing, also laying down those foundations. So when you take an app out of house, have a third party, coding that for you, that they have accessibility built into their process as well, is super. So kind of curious, either of you feel free to chime in. We'll start with Joe, but I was surprised by one finding of your report, which is, with Apple pioneering so many accessibility features, really pioneering the modern version of a screen reader on a smartphone, among many other features, we kind of assume the disability community flocked to iOS, and thus that all iOS apps should be more accessible. This is definitely not the case. Joe, what were some of the findings, and were they surprising?
I'd say that, it really comes down to the individual developer at the end of the day. And so I wouldn't say that it's surprising when there are issues on both sides of the fence, and I won't call out anything specific. I will let Ben go into some more of those details. But at the end of the day, the platforms allow you to create accessible apps, but you still have to pay attention to it. And one of the big things that I think is overlooked very often is the equivalent experience, which is the number of interactions when you're trying to do an activity. Because you can sit there and officially be compliant with the web content accessibility guidelines. Of course, mobile is not web, but you can comply by guidelines. But if it takes you 15 steps, if you're using a screen reader, to do something that the equivalent is one step, and you haven't tested that with users, then you might officially be accessible, but you're not really functional. And I think that's something that's overlooked, even with all of the majors, with the apps that they're providing to end users. It can often get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, and I think the report found that in the apps that we tested, which the 50 apps that we selected to test, we did find that Android had a slightly higher score than iOS, kind of average score. Android was at, I believe, 56, and iOS was at 48, which certainly comes as a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those were close enough. They were both kind of right around the 50-ish mark. And I think, if we had selected a different set of apps, that those two could have traded places.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that difference was statistically significant, but what it did tell us was it absolutely dispelled the myth that if you build on iOS, you get accessibility for free, or if you build on Android, you get accessibility for free. You can use the native components, and they're a good kind of foundation and building blocks, but you've still got to actually piece them together in a way that makes sense and then test it with real users. And that was why we, in addition to our internal testing with the report, we also brought in members of the Fable community to help provide that additional layer of feedback and perspective on not just the quantitative aspect of the measurements, but the more qualitative human impact of why those things matter.
And I'm going to add something here, if that's okay. When we first started doing our mobile, or that initial mobile report, we also found that iOS did better than Android when it came to free apps, because we broke it down by free apps and paid apps, and then Android did better on the paid apps. And so data can be kind of funny that way. Depending how you slice it, you find different results, and sometimes there doesn't seem to be a rhyme or reason.
I mean, it's good to know in a way that playing field between the two operating systems is more level than I would have thought. Curious about another finding here from the report. Streaming apps, I believe, scored the highest overall in terms of accessibility. Lowest overall, shopping apps. Very interesting. It goes back to what we were saying about how this is not a charity. People with disabilities have money to spend and want to spend money. So, Ben, I guess I'm just curious if you could give me some idea of what you found. And then from a pan-disability perspective, I mean, just thinking about myself being totally blind, shopping is such a visual thing. And that's one thing I saw in the report. People couldn't really even see what products looked like, or were like. I'll stop rambling. But yeah, if you could summarize that for me, your findings, and tell me what you think can be done to change the situation.
Yeah, we definitely kind of, a lot of our findings were things that we had some suspicions about, and the findings we found them disappointing but not surprising. With retail and shopping, I have a theory that's kind of a move fast and break things environment in a lot of ways. Like, you've got to get new product listed with the new season, and you've got, I think that environment just is a breeding ground for poor practice. I think it can be. And things like alt text that doesn't get considered, or is formulaic and not actually, providing an equitable experience, happens, I think, because in some ways that environment is so rapid. Things come on and off the shelf so quickly. And especially in some apps, you've got user-generated content that's being sold on a platform. So you've got to find a way to provide that or incentivize sellers to provide that content and description about their own products. And I think that's a tricky thing for platforms to enable. So, yeah, we did find that retail and shopping was really lackluster in that regard. On the other side of the spectrum, on the streaming apps, those did score highest of the 5 industries we looked at, although that was still only 60 out of 100 average score. So still a very long way to go. We think that maybe streaming benefited from being born out of the traditional broadcast media environment, which has been regulated from an accessibility standpoint for decades now. And so they maybe got a leg up or a head start on that, but still clearly have a long way to go.
And let's add something too. The user experience is all over the map, period. I was just shopping for flowers this morning. I was thinking about the interview coming up, and the pictures were so tiny. One of them, it said designer's choice. There wasn't even a single picture showing an example. The titles were cut off. Like literally, you couldn't even read what it was, just like roses and it was cut off, right? Unless you click buy now. And so the experience can be really bad for everybody. And so saying, okay, let's also make sure that it's working, with screen readers and assistive technology. Sometimes that barrier, as Ben was saying, I think the cause of all of this is that technology is way too hard. I think that we have centered ourselves around standards that only corporations can deal with because they've got designers and they've got project managers and they have all of these systems for teams, but they didn't simplify the standards so that individual developers could build a mobile app, could build a website, and conform to standards. Like that's really a failing from those of us that have been involved in building those standards, if that makes sense.
That's actually a really good analogy. We'll know that things are fully accessible when I could buy flowers and know that not only am I showing up with some flowers, but actually have an idea of what they look like and that they match the person's style and preference. That's a really good one. Ben, I know our time with you is short, so I'm just curious if you had any other thoughts that stuck out to you on the report here, or what we can do to change things.
Yeah, I think for us, the standout was, while we did have nine apps failing, 2 scoring grade, and we had the differences between iOS and Android, we did have a couple of those bright spots where we could tell that teams had done really great work, and we could tell that there's still a lot of work to be done. So again, it's our first time putting out a report like this. And our hope is that this is something we can continue to monitor and measure over time, and that ideally the confluence of stricter regulations and maybe hopefully assistance from AI to build things more accessibly by default over time, that we'll see this benchmark get better and better as time goes on.
Joe, we talked a little bit about going beyond just the screen reader or the accessibility features on the phone, but really talking about the experience of the app as a whole. Particularly, one thing I didn't even think of was portrait and landscape orientation support. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about how it's not just about the accessibility features, it's about the whole experience.
Well, I mean, it is really important if you have mobility issues. You might have your orientation fixed in one particular direction, and so if you do not have the ability to use the app in a particular orientation, this is a huge problem. So that's a big concern. But I'd love to go a little bit deeper into the cultural issue that you brought up, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So the GAD Foundation, one of the things that came out of watching all these reports fly out that talk about how inaccessible experiences are, it really dawned on us that culture is where it's at, because the people that are building digital technology, if they feel culturally, here they are, they're craftspeople. And if they come out with a product that is inaccessible, essentially these are bugs. And the example that I always love to use is the online offline indicators. If you have a button that's green or red to indicate online or offline, to somebody that's colorblind, that will probably look like gray and gray. And you just need to have like the word underneath online, offline, and it costs you zero money to do that in advance. However, if you only use color to convey information, then you're not good at your craft because you're not aware of one of the very basics of design. And when you approach it from that perspective, if designers feel like they're showing each other an inaccessible design and they're embarrassed because that just shows that they're not good at what they do, now you've achieved something. Whereas if you're trying to get the CFO, like, you don't need to ask permission as a designer to be good at your craft. Or if you're a front-end developer, or you're building technology and it applies to the product people, if that's just imbued in everything that people are doing, then we're gonna have an achievement, because it won't be related to how many lawsuits there are, what the laws are on the books, whether the CFO gives you permission to be good at what you do or not. It just completely changes the conversation, and that's where I think we have to go.
Yeah. Yeah, it really just is related to how well designed your app is, not specifically just for people with disabilities, but it really just makes for better code and better, as you said, UI in general. I want to make sure that we talk about Global Accessibility Awareness Day. When is that coming up this year? And can you talk about that awareness component? Like, how is Global Accessibility Awareness Day? What is the goal? How is it changing awareness regarding accessible digital content?
Yeah, it's the third Thursday in every May, which this year is May 15, actually. And the goal of it is to, again, change the cultural, the amount of awareness that people that build digital products have when it comes to making their products work for people with disabilities. So that's the overall. Every year, it's sort of a tent pole inside of corporations. Their accessibility teams do internal events. So if you go to accessibility.day, you will see a list of events, and usually it's about 200 publicly, either publicly announced events. You can't attend any of them, but you can attend most of them. And then there's probably at least as many internal events that are not known to people. And those really help an organization internally to do a lot of training. Some people do a full month of accessibility training in order to improve the situation for people that need that training. But I'd also love to chat a bit about what we're working on now is an AI component, because that's obviously a big deal in terms of what's coming up.
It's going to be brilliant. People have so many criticisms about AI, but I would imagine in accessibility context, an auditing perspective, AI is going to be crucial.
All right, since we're running out of time, I'll say it quickly. What we're working on is there's a lot of AI tools that generate code, and we need to make sure, since this is going to be a winner-takes-all market, that the AI models do a good job of accessibility. So we're working on AMAC, which is AI Model Accessibility Checker, where you can compare, we're doing evals where you can compare the quality, how accessible the code that the different models generate is, in order to try and get these AI model companies to compete on that metric.
I have so many more questions, and I would love to check in with you on that, do a part 2, but unfortunately we are out of time for now. Joe, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks as well to Ben for taking part in this edition of The Pulse. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to Joe Devon and Ben Ogilvie for joining us today on The Pulse. You can find that report by Googling the State of Mobile App Accessibility Report. The Pulse airs on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern on AMI Audio, repeating every 6 hours. You can also find the show on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Grant Hardy. Thanks for listening.